The Disappeared, Part 4, Eduardo. My dear Sylvia, this is what I have learned. In this place my body is not my own. The body I have taken such care of all these years, washing it and clothing it, feeding it and exercising it, has been taken from me. It belongs to General Ramos, who sends for me each morning. At least I think it is morning, for there is no window in my cell, and the bulb that hangs from the ceiling is my sun and moon. I am feeble, for I am given nothing to eat but a little bread or thin soup, which is brought to me sporadically or not at all. Hunger meddles with my every thought. The guard comes for me and I am led blindfolded into a room. I stand with my arms twisted around to the back and handcuffed. My arms feel as if they have been torn from my shoulders. In my weakness, I weave a little from side to side. General Ramos gives an order, and someone strikes me. I fall, exhausted, to the floor, and someone throws water on me. General Ramos decides what my body will do. I can see from the general's stripes that he has a high rank. He asks the same questions over and over. He sounds bored and angry, as if he doesn't want to be there. But at the same time, being there is important to him. Some of the questions I expect. Who worked with you against the government? Who has been disloyal at the university? At the trade union? General Ramos is very angry. He says you may as well know that one of your so-called friends betrayed you. What is more, we have the treasonous articles you wrote. I say, it is not treason to love your country. I am someone who hates what is happening to Argentina, and I say so. A guard hits me about the shoulders with a rubber truncheon. The truncheon lands on the back of my neck, and I lose consciousness. As I come to, I hear a voice through the pain. The voice says, "I'm a doctor, can you hear me?" I am grateful. Someone to care for me, I mumble. Yes. The doctor says, "He's fine. You can go ahead. Just watch where you strike him." The words of the doctor hurt more than any blow. All my life I have seen my father practice his profession to help others. He is a strong man and brusque in behavior, but his eyes and his fingers are always tender. He is giving his life to the end of suffering of others. Once I tried to help Dichoso after he caught his foot in a trap set for rats, but my dog snarled and showed his teeth. He trusted only father's tenderness. That a doctor would aid the generals destroys all my hope. If they have the power to seduce a doctor to do the very opposite of what his profession calls for, they have more power than even I thought, and I am utterly helpless against it. Still, I tell myself that every minute I resist is a minute more for Caesar and Maria and the others to escape before the day I name them. And I am sure that day will come, for I have heard the screams of those whose torture must be worse than blows with a truncheon. Impatience creeps into the voice of my inquisitor. "You are a fool to think you can outlast me," he says. "The increase in the strikes tells me my day will soon arrive." I am brought back to my prison cell and given a push that lands me on the floor. I dread the cell, for worse than the truncheon is the pain of loneliness. Anything can be borne if it is not borne alone. Just then, I hear tapping noises from the adjoining cell. I put my arms against the cold concrete wall and embrace it. The taps are deliberate and come in a series. After a minute, I know what they are, the universal language of prisoners. I learned of it first in Arthur Koestler's book, Darkness at Noon, a story of a Russian prison. All over the world, where prisoners sit alone in their cells, they rely on a kind of code. It would take forever to tap out each letter of the alphabet, but if you make a little box of 5 rows with the alphabet divided amongst them, you can tap out the row and then the letter. I hear 1 tap for the first row, then 3 taps for the third letter in that row. This gives C. My comrade keeps tapping until he has spelled out a word, courage. I tap back the same message. At that moment, no one in my whole life, not mother or father or even you, Sylvia, is dearer to me. Not to be alone is as good as having an army on my side. A bond with another prisoner will help to protect me against the worst they can do. The worst soon comes. I am dragged back to the Inquisitor. General Ramos asks again and again what I know, and when I say I know nothing, it is time for the picana, the electric cattle prod. They tie me to a table and splash me with water so that the electric shocks will be more painful. The picana is applied to the most vulnerable parts of my body. My torturers might be cutting with pleasure into the tenderest section of a cut of beef, savoring the way the knife slices easily into the meat and only blood pools on the plate. At first, the electric prod only stings, and then it burns. A voice that no longer belongs to me screams. Again, the doctor comes, for they do not want me to die. Then the questions all over again. Then the picana. I will not speak of this again. I return to the cell and the tapping. At first, I am unable to concentrate, but finally I make out the message, pity. I remember words I had read by the Russian writer Dostoevsky. Man cannot live without pity. I think of all the years and all the millions of people who have cried out for pity. Now I am lost among them. Alone and terrified of what will come, I flee to the past. For the past is all I have, and maybe all I will ever have. I look about in my memories to make a book to read, for I have come to realize that our lives are but books to read and reread. We cross out and add, and finally we come up with happy endings. I am desperate for a happy ending. Remember, Sylvia, the time you and I went with Mother and Father to visit Uncle Julio at his estancia? You were 10 and I was 13. How I had bragged at school about our uncle who owned a ranch and 500 head of cattle. To keep my mind busy, I try to rebuild every inch of the 2 hours of travel from our busy city of Buenos Aires to the little town of San Antonio de Areco. Before we made the visit, I had read the great Argentinian poem Martin Fierro about the life of the cowboy gauchos on the Pampas, how they tended the cattle by day and by night fought one another to the death with their facones, knives in vengeful quarrels. They slept on the ground with no shelter but the heaven and stars above. I remember how thrilled and excited I was at the prospect of meeting real gauchos. We crossed the river Areco on an old bridge and drove through the countryside with its green fields and vast spaces like great empty rooms. Suddenly, cities seemed unnecessary, even foolish. Uncle Julio's casco, with its wings and terraces and porches, was spread across a wide green lawn. I wanted to go immediately to the ranch to see the 500 cattle, but first we had a luncheon. I remember the 2-story dining hall with its great beams and how you embarrassed Father by weeping for the deer and wild boar whose heads were nailed to the whitewashed walls. Sylvia, you were always someone to feel another's pain. I know you are thinking of me now. We sat at a table for what seemed hours as the servants brought in trays of enormous barbecued steak. I was afraid there would be no cows left on the ranch for me to see. At last, Uncle Julio said, "Come along now and I'll show you some fine cattle." He put me into a jeep and drove out onto the fields. I was still expecting gauchos with wide pants and belts of silver, and tucked into the belt, the deadly facon. Instead, the gauchos wore blue jeans and leather belts, and I saw no knives. Nevertheless, looking out over the grasslands that stretched to the horizon, I was sure theirs was the life I wanted. Shyly, I asked Uncle Julio, "Could I come and work for you?" He said, "I'll keep a place for you, Eduardo. But first you must finish school and go to university. When you graduate, if you still wish to come, you will be welcome. Of course, you must be content to sleep in the dormitory with 24 gauchos and to get up before daylight and go to bed with the sun." "Si, I eagerly assented. I brought home the horns from one of the steers and triumphantly put them up on the wall of my bedroom as a promise. I gave up the dream of working on a ranch long ago, but now it comes back to me in my cell and I make use of it. I empty myself of fear by filling each second, imagining what that life might be. I picture the dormitory where we gauchos sleep. I hear the sounds of men stirring on their cots, turning over, snoring, mumbling to themselves as they live in their dreams. I see the first rays of the sun lighten the windows and the men grumbling and swearing at another day of hard work, rolling out of bed, pulling on shirts and jeans, stumbling half asleep to their breakfast of steak. It gives them the strength for the day's work, Uncle Julio had said. Minute by minute I go through their day, adding and subtracting. One day all is peaceful, but another day some word is taken for an insult, and there is a fight. with the gauchos taking sides and plotting revenge. In my imagination I live each day for the night, when I steal out of the dormitory and lie alone under the heavens, the Southern Cross overhead in a black sea of stars, the last thing I see before I close my eyes and sleep. For I can't sleep, shut into this coffin of concrete with no sky above me, and no star but the cruel light bulb. I and the prisoner in the cell next to me are cautious with our tapping, reluctant to give even our names, unsure if we have been placed next to each other to gain incriminating evidence, but the need to communicate with fellow human being is strong. I tap student, and he taps me too, university. We are both students at the university. With a shudder, I think of Caesar and the other students who demonstrated with me. I had to take a chance and tap my name, Eduardo. He taps back, Ramon. I can't breathe. I tell myself Ramon is a common name, that it is impossible for this to be the Ramon who once was my friend, who stood together with me against the generals, who distributed the leaflets I wrote, and then drove about with the soldiers to turn me in. I draw away from the wall, but I have to know. A sister. I tap. Sylvia? Teresa, he taps, and the taps come fast. Eduardo, is it you? Is my family safe? I catch my breath. I want to tell Ramon that I've risked my life to protect them, but is he to be trusted? Would any message I tapped be told to Ramos? I want to let Ramon know that Teresa and his mother have escaped, but have they? And if they haven't, my mentioning them might mean trouble. I am unsure of my motive. Do I really think it is dangerous to mention Teresa and her mother's name, or do I want to punish Ramon for his part in my imprisonment? For either reason or both, I don't respond, leaving this boy who may be my friend with silence in which to nourish his fear. I am learning cruelty.